My brother smiled when the lawyer said Mom's will had been read. Not relieved, not emotional, smug. The kind of smile someone wears when they think they've already won. Then he looked directly at me and said, Mom knew who was there for her in the end. The room went silent. Every relative heard it. Every relative understood what he meant. And every relative looked at me. Because according to my brother, Mom had left me nothing. Not the house, not her savings, not even the family jewelry she'd promised me since I was 12 years old. Nothing. For 6 months, he repeated the same story. To relatives, to neighbors, to family friends. Mom was disappointed in me. Mom felt abandoned. Mom changed her mind. Mom made her choice. And eventually, everyone believed him. Even I started wondering if it was true. Then a contractor renovating Mom's attic found an old wooden box. Inside that box was a journal. A journal nobody knew existed. Not my brother, not the lawyer, not even me. At first, it looked like an ordinary diary. Then we opened it. The first page contained my name. The second page destroyed my brother's story. And by the time the final entry was read aloud, the man who spent months telling everyone Mom left me nothing wished that journal had never been found. But to understand why Mom's journal changed everything, you need to understand how my brother convinced an entire family that I had failed the woman I loved most. My name is Hannah. I'm 34 years old, and my mother was my best friend. Not in the cliche way people say it, not because we agreed on everything, because we didn't. We argued, disagreed, annoyed each other constantly, but underneath all of that was trust, the kind of trust that takes years to build. My father died when I was 16. After that, it was mostly Mom, my older brother Ryan, and me. The three of us became our own small world, at least for a while. Ryan was 4 years older than me. Growing up, he always needed to be the center of attention. The best grades, the best stories, the most praise. If I won something, Ryan had to win something bigger. If I got attention, Ryan found a way to get more. Mom used to laugh about it. It's just his personality. Maybe she was right. Or maybe she didn't want to admit how much it affected our family. As adults, Ryan and I grew apart, not because of one major argument, because of hundreds of small ones, different priorities, different values, different lives. Ryan stayed in our hometown. I moved 3 hours away, started a career, built a life, got married. Mom supported me completely. She was proud of me. At least that's what she always said. Every Sunday, we talked for hours, sometimes about important things, sometimes about absolutely nothing. Recipes, movies, family gossip, the ordinary conversations that become priceless once they're gone. Then Mom got sick. At first, nobody realized how serious it was. A little fatigue, a few medical appointments, some tests. Then came the diagnosis. And suddenly everything changed. Ryan immediately became Mom's primary caregiver, which made sense. He lived nearby. I didn't. I visited whenever I could, called every day, sent groceries, paid bills when needed, did everything I could from a distance. But distance has a way of creating appearances, and appearances can become stories, especially when someone benefits from telling them. As Mom's condition worsened, Ryan started making comments, small comments, the kind that sounded harmless. Hannah's busy these days. Hannah has her own life. Hannah couldn't make it this weekend. None of those statements were technically false, but together they created a picture that wasn't true. Slowly, relatives began repeating those same ideas. Hannah doesn't visit much. Ryan does everything. Your brother has sacrificed so much. I heard those comments constantly, and every time I did, something felt wrong. Because Mom never complained. Never. In fact, whenever I apologized for living far away, she always said the same thing. Honey, don't let guilt steal your happiness. Those words stayed with me, especially during Mom's final year, because the more her health declined, the more Ryan seemed determined to control the narrative. And I wouldn't realize how dangerous that narrative had become until the day after Mom's funeral. The day Ryan announced to everyone that Mom had left me nothing. Mom's illness changed everything. Not overnight, not all at once, but slowly, painfully. The treatments became more frequent. The hospital visits became longer. The good days became fewer. And every time I drove home to see her, she seemed a little smaller, a little weaker, a little more tired. Watching it happen was heartbreaking. But no matter how difficult things became, Mom never stopped being Mom. She still asked about my job, still worried whether I was eating properly, still reminded me to drive safely before every trip home, even from a hospital bed, especially from a hospital bed. Ryan became the center of everything. Doctors called him first, nurses spoke to him first, relatives thanked him constantly. Again, that made sense. He was nearby. He handled most of the day-to-day responsibilities, and I genuinely appreciated everything he was doing, at least in the beginning. Then something started changing. Whenever I called Mom, Ryan often answered. She's sleeping. She's tired. She's having a rough day. At first, I believed him, because those explanations sounded reasonable, but eventually, it happened too often. Far too often. Sometimes I would call 3 times in one day. Ryan always had an explanation. Always. Then came the visits. I would tell Mom I planned to come Saturday. A few days later, Ryan would call. Don't bother. What? She's exhausted. I'll ask her. No need. The answer always felt strange, like Ryan had started making decisions that weren't his to make. One weekend, I ignored him. I drove 3 hours anyway, and when I arrived, Mom looked surprised, not unhappy, surprised. Hannah? I smiled. You sound shocked. Mom frowned. Ryan said you couldn't come. The room went silent. I stared at her. What? She looked confused. He said work was too busy. My stomach dropped. Because I never said that. Not once. Mom saw my expression immediately, and for the first time I noticed concern in her eyes. Real concern. The kind she tried to hide. That night, after Ryan left the room, Mom reached for my hand. Then she quietly said, Don't let anyone tell you what kind of daughter you are. The statement felt random, at least at the time. Now I know it wasn't. Mom knew something was wrong. Maybe not everything, but enough. The months passed, and Ryan's comments became more aggressive, less subtle. One family gathering, I overheard him speaking to our cousins. Hannah means well. The words sounded harmless, until he continued. But some people love from a distance. The cousins nodded sympathetically. Ryan sighed dramatically. Meanwhile, somebody has to actually be here. The implication was obvious and effective. Because people love simple stories. The devoted son, the absent daughter, the sacrifice, the gratitude. The problem was that none of it reflected reality. Ryan was helping Mom. That part was true. But so was I. Only my support happened where most people couldn't see it. The phone calls, the bills, the medications, the appointments I arranged, the nights I stayed awake worrying. Invisible effort is still effort, but invisible effort doesn't create a good story. Then came the worst day of my life. Mom passed away early on a Monday morning. Ryan called at 5:17 a.m. I knew before I answered. Somehow I knew. The drive home felt endless. Every mile hurt. Every memory hurt. Everything hurt. The funeral happened 4 days later. I barely remember most of it. The flowers, the prayers, the condolences, everything blurred together. What I do remember is Ryan's speech, because halfway through it, he said something strange, something that bothered me immediately. Mom appreciated the people who stood beside her during her hardest years. Several relatives nodded. Then Ryan looked directly at me, only for a second. But it was enough. The message was clear, and many people understood it. After the service, relatives gathered at Mom's house. People talked, shared memories, cried. Then Ryan stood near the fireplace and cleared his throat. The room gradually became quiet. I assumed he wanted to thank everyone for coming. Instead, he announced something shocking. Mom's affairs have already been handled. Several relatives looked surprised, including me. Ryan continued. Mom made her wishes clear before she died. My stomach tightened, because something about his tone felt wrong. Very wrong. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Mom left the house to me. Whispers immediately spread through the room. Ryan nodded confidently, and most of the remaining assets as well. I stared at him, confused, because we hadn't met with a lawyer. Nobody had seen a will. Nothing official had happened. Yet Ryan was speaking like everything was already settled. Then he looked directly at me and smiled, not kindly, not sadly, smugly. The same smile I'd seen my entire life. Then he delivered the final blow. Hannah understands. I did? Apparently not. Because I had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. Then Ryan said the words that would haunt me for months. Mom knew who was there for her. Silence. Heavy silence. The room didn't need an explanation. Everyone understood exactly what he meant. And judging by the looks on their faces, many of them believed him. What I didn't know was that Ryan's story was about to become even bigger. Because over the next 6 months, he would repeat it so often that it would start sounding like fact. And by the time Mom's hidden journal was discovered in the attic, nearly everyone would have forgotten what the truth looked like. For 6 months, Ryan controlled the story. And eventually, he controlled everything else too. Mom's house, Mom's paperwork, Mom's bank statements, Mom's belongings. Anything connected to her passed through Ryan first. At least that's how it felt. The strangest part wasn't what Ryan said. It was how often people repeated it. Every family gathering became the same conversation. Your brother sacrificed so much. Your mother depended on him. Ryan was there every day. The statements weren't false, but they were incomplete. And incomplete truths can be just as misleading as lies. Soon, relatives stopped asking about me altogether. They simply assumed they knew the situation. The devoted son, the absent daughter, the son who stayed, the daughter who left. A simple story, an easy story, a false story. One afternoon, Aunt Carol called me. Her voice sounded hesitant, uncomfortable. After several minutes of small talk, she finally asked, "Did your mother leave you anything?" The question stunned me, because nobody had officially discussed the estate, not publicly, not legally. Yet somehow everyone already seemed convinced they knew the answer. I swallowed hard. I don't know. A long silence followed. Then Aunt Carol sighed. Oh. That single word told me everything. She believed Ryan. Most people did. And every day that passed made the story harder to challenge. A few weeks later, I visited Mom's grave. Alone. The cemetery was quiet. Peaceful. I sat beside her headstone for nearly an hour, talking, crying, remembering. Then I found myself asking a question I hated, a question I never thought I'd ask. What if Ryan was right? The thought felt awful, disloyal, yet it wouldn't leave, because grief makes people vulnerable. And hearing the same lie long enough can make even obvious truths feel uncertain. For the first time in my life, I questioned my relationship with Mom. Not because she gave me a reason to, because other people did. That night I opened my phone and scrolled through years of messages, hundreds of them, photos, recipes, birthday wishes, inside jokes, messages from Mom telling me she loved me, messages telling me she was proud of me, messages telling me to stop worrying so much. The evidence was everywhere. Yet somehow Ryan's version of events still lingered in the back of my mind. That was the power of repetition, the power of a story repeated often enough. Then something unexpected happened. 3 months later, Ryan hired contractors to renovate Mom's house. He planned to move in permanently. Several relatives praised the decision, others called it practical. Ryan acted like the property already belonged entirely to him, as if the matter had never been questioned. One Friday afternoon, I received a phone call, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. Instead, I answered. Hello? A man introduced himself. His name was Tom, one of the contractors working on Mom's attic. I frowned. Why are you calling me? There was a brief pause. Then Tom asked a strange question. Were you close to your mother? My heart immediately tightened. What? He repeated the question, more gently this time. I swallowed. Yes. Tom hesitated, then said something unexpected. We found something. The room seemed to tilt. What kind of something? Another pause. Then, a wooden box. I sat perfectly still. Tom continued. It was hidden behind insulation in the attic. My pulse quickened. Because Mom rarely hid things. Never, actually. At least not that I knew of. Then Tom said 4 words that changed everything. Your name is on it. I stopped breathing. For several seconds, I couldn't speak, couldn't think, couldn't move. Because suddenly every instinct I had screamed the same thing. Mom wanted someone to find it. Eventually. Just not immediately. I drove to the house the following morning. Ryan was already there, and judging by the expression on his face, he was not happy. Not happy at all. The wooden box sat on the dining room table, small, old, covered in dust, and attached to the top was a faded envelope, written in Mom's unmistakable handwriting. Across the front were 7 words. For Hannah, if the truth matters. The moment I read them, Ryan's confidence disappeared. Because for the first time in 6 months, neither of us knew what Mom was about to say. And somehow, that scared him far more than it scared me. Nobody spoke as we stared at the wooden box. The room felt smaller, heavier. Ryan stood near the dining room window, his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. But I noticed something. For the first time in months, he looked nervous. Very nervous. The contractor quietly stepped away, leaving the box on the table. Waiting. Everyone waiting. I slowly reached for the envelope attached to the top. My hands trembled. Because the handwriting was unmistakable. Mom's. The same handwriting I'd seen on birthday cards, recipe cards, Christmas gifts, and now, possibly her final message. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded note, several lines long. I unfolded it and began reading aloud. If you're reading this. My voice cracked immediately. I stopped, took a breath, then continued. Then someone finally found the box. The room became silent. And if Hannah is standing there, tears immediately filled my eyes. Honey, I need you to know something before you read another page. The words blurred. I blinked hard, then continued. Never doubt how much I loved you. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Not for one day. Not for 1 minute. Not even once. A painful silence followed. Because everyone in that room knew exactly what Ryan had been saying for 6 months. And Mom's very first message destroyed it, completely. Then came the final line. The journal inside explains everything. I slowly lifted the lid. The hinges creaked softly. Inside sat a thick blue notebook. Worn, used, filled, very filled. Years of entries. Years. Not weeks. Not months. Years. Ryan immediately stepped forward. We don't need to do this. The room froze. Because his reaction felt strange. Too fast. Too defensive. I looked at him. Why not? Ryan hesitated, then shrugged. Mom's gone. Nobody answered. Because suddenly nobody agreed. Not even a little. I opened the journal. The first page contained a date. 3 years before Mom died. Then I began reading. Today, Hannah called me during her lunch break. The room remained quiet. She was exhausted from work, but still spent 40 minutes listening to me complain about my garden. A few relatives exchanged glances. I continued. I told her she didn't have to call every day. She laughed and said that's what daughters are for. Tears rolled down my cheeks, because I remembered that conversation. perfectly. Then I turned another page, and another, and another. Every entry told the same story: phone calls, visits, messages, support, love, years of it. Everything Ryan claimed didn't exist. Then I reached an entry highlighted with yellow marker. The room grew still, because highlighted entries meant something. Important things. I read aloud. Ryan told me today that Hannah probably won't visit this month. Silence. Then the next line. An hour later, Hannah called to tell me she already booked her trip. The room froze. I looked up. Ryan stared at the floor. Nobody said a word. I continued reading. I don't understand why Ryan keeps making assumptions about his sister. The silence became uncomfortable. Painfully uncomfortable. Then came another highlighted entry. One written only 8 months before Mom died. I swallowed hard and read. Ryan told relatives Hannah rarely contacts me. A pause. Then the next sentence. If anyone ever reads this, that statement is false. The room erupted into whispers. Immediately. Because Mom wasn't expressing feelings. She was correcting facts, documenting facts, recording facts. Exactly the way Dad had in those lawyer stories she'd always loved reading. Then I turned another page, and everything changed. Because taped inside the journal was a printed email. An email Ryan never expected anyone to see. An email that proved Mom knew exactly what he had been doing. And once it was read aloud, the story he'd spent 6 months building would begin collapsing in front of everyone. The room was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My hands shook as I stared at the email taped inside Mom's journal. The paper looked old, folded, handled many times, as if Mom had returned to it repeatedly, reading it, thinking about it, trying to understand it. I carefully removed the tape, then unfolded the page. At the top was a date. 10 months before Mom died. My stomach tightened, because I immediately recognized it. It was the month I missed Thanksgiving. The month Ryan told everyone I had chosen work over family. The month several relatives stopped speaking to me. I began reading. The email was from me, sent directly to Mom. Mom, I'm sorry I can't come this weekend. Several relatives nodded. Exactly the story Ryan had always told. Then I continued. The doctor won't let me travel until the surgery heals. The room froze. Complete silence. Because nobody knew about the surgery. Almost nobody. I kept reading. As soon as I'm cleared to drive, I'll come see you. I already booked the following weekend. Another pause. Then the final sentence. Please don't let Ryan worry you. I'll be there soon. I lowered the page. The room became painfully quiet. Because Ryan had told everyone something very different. According to him, I skipped Thanksgiving because I didn't care, because work mattered more, because family wasn't a priority. The email proved otherwise, and that was only the beginning. Attached behind it was a handwritten note from Mom. I swallowed hard, then read it aloud. Ryan told 6 different relatives Hannah simply didn't want to come. Nobody moved. I showed him this email. The room grew still. He said people didn't need to know the details. A stunned silence followed. Then the final sentence. I am beginning to worry Ryan prefers his version of events over the truth. The words hit the room like a bomb. Because they weren't my words. They weren't accusations. They were Mom's. Written privately. Long before anyone expected this journal to be found. Then I turned another page and found something worse. Much worse. A list. Names, dates, conversations, dozens of them. Mom had documented every time Ryan misrepresented something. Every time. The entries stretched across nearly 2 years. Ryan told Aunt Carol Hannah hasn't called. Hannah called this morning. Another. Ryan said Hannah forgot my birthday. Hannah organized the entire dinner. Another. Ryan claimed Hannah canceled her visit. I canceled because of my treatment. The room was stunned. Page after page, entry after entry, pattern after pattern. Ryan wasn't protecting Mom. He was rewriting the story. Slowly, carefully, consistently. And Mom had noticed. Everything. Then came the entry that changed the room. A red bookmark marked the page. The only red bookmark in the entire journal. My hands trembled as I opened it. Mom had written, "Today I met with Attorney Sullivan." Every head lifted. Every eye focused on the journal. Because now we were talking about the estate, the inheritance, the thing Ryan had been discussing for months. I continued reading. I updated my estate instructions. Ryan suddenly shifted in his chair. For the first time all day, he looked afraid. Genuinely afraid. Then came the sentence nobody expected. Not because I love one child more than the other. The room remained silent. Because fairness requires honesty. I felt my heart pounding. Then Mom wrote, "If Hannah ever reads this, I want her to know she was never forgotten." Tears immediately filled my eyes. And if anyone claims otherwise, I paused. Because the next line was underlined. Twice. They are lying. Nobody looked at Ryan anymore. Nobody needed to. The journal had already answered every question, every doubt, every rumor. Then I reached the final page marked with a ribbon, a page titled, "To be read after my death." The room instantly became silent again, because everyone understood. This wasn't another journal entry. This was Mom's final message, and according to the note at the top, it contained instructions regarding the inheritance. The inheritance Ryan had been claiming was settled for 6 months. The inheritance nobody had actually seen. And judging by the expression on Ryan's face, whatever Mom wrote on that page, he desperately hoped it would never be read. The room was silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. I stared at the final page. The page titled, "To be read after my death." My hands trembled. Because somehow I already knew. Everything Ryan had spent 6 months claiming. Everything the family believed. Everything I had started doubting. The answer was on this page. Waiting. I took a deep breath. Then began reading. If this page is being read, then I am gone. The room became still. And if my children are together, then there is something I need both of them to hear. I glanced toward Ryan. For the first time all day, he wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't look at anyone. Mom continued. A parent's love is not a competition. There is no winner. There is no favorite. Several relatives lowered their heads because they knew exactly where this was going. Mom continued. Ryan helped me tremendously during my illness. For a moment, Ryan seemed relieved. Then Mom's next sentence arrived. And Hannah never stopped showing up. The relief disappeared instantly. Whether through phone calls, visits, letters, support, or simply love, she was there. Tears filled my eyes, because those were the words I had needed for months. Not the inheritance, not the house. Those words. Mom continued. If anyone ever claims Hannah abandoned me, I paused, because the next line was underlined. That person is lying. The room froze. Complete silence. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Because Mom had just destroyed the story Ryan built over 6 months. In a single sentence. Then came the inheritance section. The part everyone had been waiting for. I swallowed hard and continued reading. Regarding my estate, Ryan sat perfectly still. I intentionally chose not to discuss details publicly while I was alive. I knew misunderstandings could occur. The room remained silent. Then came the sentence nobody expected. My house is to be sold. Several relatives looked surprised, including Ryan. The proceeds shall be divided equally between my 2 children. A gasp escaped from somewhere across the room. Because Ryan had spent months acting like the house belonged entirely to him, it didn't. Not even close. Mom continued. My savings shall also be divided equally. Another shock. My investment accounts shall be divided equally. Ryan looked pale. Very pale. Because every assumption he'd made was wrong. Every single one. Then came the final surprise. Mom's jewelry collection. The collection everyone assumed would be worth a fortune. Mom wrote, my jewelry is to go to Hannah. Tears immediately filled my eyes. Because the jewelry wasn't valuable to me financially, it was sentimental. It contained pieces that belonged to my grandmother, pieces Mom wore my entire childhood, pieces she once promised me, a promise she kept. Then came her final message, the final paragraph, the last words she ever left behind. Ryan, the room became still. I know you love me. Ryan slowly looked up. But love should never require rewriting someone else's story. The room froze. Your sister was never your competition. Tears formed in Ryan's eyes. Real tears. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Regret. Then Mom addressed me. Hannah. I could barely breathe. Stop questioning your place in this family. Tears rolled down my face. You never had to earn my love. You already had it. The words shattered something inside me. Months of doubt, months of guilt, months of wondering if I had somehow failed her. Gone. Just gone. Then came Mom's final sentence. The final sentence she would ever write. Tell the truth. Love each other. And stop keeping score. Silence. Heavy silence. I lowered the journal. Nobody spoke. Nobody could. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to explain. The truth had already done its work. One by one, relatives approached me. Some apologized. Others admitted they should have asked more questions. A few confessed they had completely believed Ryan. I didn't blame them. The journal had shown me something important. People often believe the story they hear most often, especially when it sounds reasonable. Eventually, only Ryan remained. For several moments, he stared at the journal, then quietly asked, Do you think Mom hated me? The question surprised everyone, including me. I looked down at the pages, at everything Mom had written. Then I answered honestly. No. Ryan looked up. Then why did she write all this? I closed the journal. Because the answer was obvious. Because she loved us both too much to let a lie survive her. Ryan began crying. And for the first time in years, I think he finally understood. The journal wasn't punishment, it was protection. Protection for the truth. Months later, the estate was settled exactly as Mom instructed. Fairly, equally. And one afternoon, while sorting through the jewelry she left me, I found a small note hidden inside a velvet box. 3 simple lines. Honey, don't let guilt rewrite good memories. Love, Mom. I framed it and placed it beside her photograph. Because after everything that happened, the rumors, the inheritance, the arguments, the journal, the lies, that note was what mattered most. Not what Mom left behind, but what she wanted me to remember, that I was loved, that I always had been, and that the truth was worth protecting.